Dear Marte, thanks very much for such a vivid description, holding up the possible all through. And now we turn to Dr. Zarni, Maung. You are with us to speak from your country and at greater depth to what is at stake. Very much welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The large number of people in attendance, it's very encouraging to see the interest level among the Swedish people here, because I don't know how many people have been to Burma or in the neighborhood, but this is not the most pressing or first priority issue for many countries, not like Palestine or ISIS. So I'm thankful that you're investing a few hours of your time in the afternoon. Before I say anything about three things that I talk about, the three things I will talk about: so reform process, broadly speaking, the context in which reforms were launched, the nature of the reforms, the individuals and institutions involved. And the second point I'll talk about is the ceasefire processes. And then the last point, I would take up the issue of Rohingya persecution by the state over the past 37 years and touch on the anti-Muslim Burmese, in quotes, Buddhist racism. Firstly, I need to mention my background in a bit more details, because I don't usually put that in any bio, because it would be inappropriate. Put it in a nutshell, I've been in different camps, and I also the camps meaning I came from a large extended military family whose members include say VIP pilot to Ne Win. Than Shwe is a commanding officer. Than Shwe is the aging despot in Burma, who married Than Shwe when he was a young captain and his wife. And I myself was a military aspirant. I was actually admit myself at the age of 16 to officers training school. I would be an officer doing all kinds of dodgy things if it weren't for my father, who said, if you join the army, you no longer have a parent or home. And so he stopped me right there. So my uncles were in the army. So when they are back from their border patrols or operations, they brought back their machine guns, pistol. They taught me how to disassemble theories. And then actually the ones who allow me to fire weapons, to actually hone my firing skills, is the Karans in the Karen National Liberation Army. All kinds of weapons. And so so my advantage as not simply as the Burmese, but as an analyst, is I have been able to see the Burmese realities through different lenses. I mean, the beauty of human world is that we can look at the same reality, the same set of factors, come up with radically different interpretations. Yeah? And so there will be a lot of things I say that will contradict what Marty's have mentioned. And there's no ill will here with colleagues. Firstly, reform process. If you recall, back in 2007, there was something called Saffron Revolt, the revolt of the monks, asking for humane economic policies towards the public. And the monks were shot down. The world was shocked. And the Buddhist monks in those days around the world, especially the Burmese monks, were cheered upon and admired for standing up against the brutal regime that has created so much hardship for the entire population. And Buddhist monks today, especially Burmese monks and Sri Lankan monks, are seen as basically racist, violent neo-Nazis in monks' uniform. That, to put it crudely, but that's also quite close to reality on the ground. And And then in 2008, May, there were two events, actually one major event planned by the regime. That was a referendum that, by which the military would adopt the constitution of, for, and by the military. Yeah? And so one of the problems talking about reforms and constitutionalism is that, you know, constitution by definition is a document that attempts to, like, essentially divide the power so that no group can, you know, in one interpretation, no single group can have monopoly over the running of the country or the kingdom. You know, in the old days, constitution limits the power of divine authority. Authority of the king is no longer divine. The king had to consult with Privy Council and listen to the you know, different laws. But we have a scenario in Burma. The military drew up a constitution, and the ultimate aim of the constitution is to put the single institution of armed forces above the law. It isn't simply about the constitution grants the military 25% of the parliamentary seats, which they will gradually phase themselves out. There are two additional problems in addition to 25% guarantee, yeah, for the military in the parliament. And one is that the military is authorized to launch a coup at any given time that they deem, you know, in the national interest. Yeah? This is a constitution that preemptively legalizes any future military coup. Yeah? And then thirdly, the military will never, basically the constitution also grants blanket impunity. It's like the United States that holds the world to one standard and that places itself any type of international treaties and doctrines. Yeah. So we have that scenario, and despite the nitty-gritties on other issues, like, you know, less relevant to me, like Aung San Suu Kyi not becoming president, you know, in the larger, grander scheme of things, whether she becomes president or head of state is irrelevant in terms of, you know, historical democratization process. What is most important is that 3 points I mentioned. One single institution placing itself above the law, granting itself impunity for anything it has done over the past 53 years, or it will be doing, or it is doing today. And then lastly, without contesting, they have 25% guarantee seat at the table. Yeah? And so those are the major things. And that constitution was scheduled to be voted in a referendum. And unfortunately, or fortunately for the military, the cyclone hit the country just 2 weeks, exactly 2 weeks, before the constitutional referendum was scheduled. And the state, in 2008, the state of the military's leadership, the mental state, was such that they were so paranoid of US invasion, yeah, using the rescue mission as a pretext, that they would let thousands of cyclone victims go without drinkable water. Yeah? And until that time, between 2004 and 2008, when I, as an activist, was persuaded by basically what I saw, as that the West was not really serious about helping Burma to democratize. Because I was a dissident, you know, begging for support from around the world, like, you know, Oslo, like Stockholm, like, you know, Berlin, Paris, Washington, lobbying. There was a split within the military. This is a time to push. Can you know, basically strengthen our hand so that, you know, the more self-enlightened and smarter faction would win over. Obviously, that, you know, I guess, like, calculation at the time did not turn out to be true either. So I wasn't entirely correct myself. So, but the point I wanted to mention is that when the cyclone hit the country, the top leadership of the military prioritized going ahead with adopting the military's constitution over saving the lives of thousands of people. to date, we will not know how many people died as a result of, basically the blockade of refusal to accept international emergency missions. If you're a humanitarian worker, you would know the first 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours are most crucial for saving lives and when a country is hit by a catastrophe. And they blocked the aid for 7 whole days. Yeah? And at the time, I was working with the head of intelligence. Yeah? And not working for them. I was engaged in what is called a second track, or track 2 diplomacy, trying to bring the Burmese negotiators with different representatives from Western governments, have them open dialogue off the record to find ways to re-engage the country. When I thought that isolation was failing us as a democratic movement and failing the Burmese public. And it was at that time that I decided that they crossed the line. Monks protesting, students protesting on the street, calling for the downfall of the regime, a general strike. Okay, they send the troops in, they shoot and kill. It is unacceptable, but it can be understood. It cannot be accepted, but it can be understood. A regime, repressive regime with so many skeletons in its closet, feeling that maybe it's their turn to lose their head, so they send the troops. Yeah, so protection, survival, I can understand it. But cyclone victims, what do they have? What had they done to deserve being deprived of drinkable water in the first 72 hours when they lost entire families? Little girls or boys hanging on to the trees when the flood was, carrying their parents away. And this was the scenario where the regime showed to me its true color, that they did not give a damn about public well-being. Yeah? And then so now on to the reform. Fast forward from 2008 to 2010, 2011, and what happened in Tunisia, what happened in Libya, what happened to Mubarak. In the Burmese language media, some of the highest ranking military officers openly talked about how they did not want to end up like Gaddafi or Saddam Hussein or Mubarak or Ben Ali from Tunisia. Yeah? So they were ready from the state of being completely paranoid to wanting to give themselves an exit strategy. And at the time, Obama had this, thing. Well, we're going to he would shake hands, instead of give a fist. His famous quote. He would welcome working with dodgy regime if they were, to become less dodgy. That's what it is. And so it was in that context the regime launched the reform. And in launching the reform, actually, the world was taken by surprise, but not Western governments, because they were involved in getting this reform launched. They were lobbying Aung San Suu Kyi heavily to accept the terms of engagement with the Burmese regime, Americans especially, and the British especially. Behind the scene, they were pushing and actually pressuring Aung San Suu Kyi to work with the regime, work within the system. And she is, so around the reforms, there had been more hypes than substance. The reforms are undertaken for the wrong reasons and towards the wrong goal. Yeah? What are the wrong reasons? Well, the wrong reason. If you look at the reforms, they are not, substantively speaking, they are not reforms. They are realignment of military's interests. Yeah? So that they will become, quote unquote, presentable, respectable, credible in the eyes of the international community. Yeah? And there is no value shift within the ruling military top leadership or within the entire armed forces. There is absolutely no value transformation. You know, like any other entity, even like commercial entity, they say these are our values. You know, like social responsibility, all that. And then the interest. What the military is trying to do is, you know, have the cake and eat it. Because reform, genuine reforms mean the military reducing the size of the pie in terms of its economic control, in terms of its administrative and political control over Burmese politics. And they are prepared to do neither. And from their perspective, reforms mean, you know, less control, less wealth, less acquisition of, you know, resources. And so, and ultimately, they see genuine reform as simply digging their own graves. Yeah? And they may be crude and crass in certain ways that they conduct themselves, but they're not stupid. They are rational actors. They know genuine reforms mean genuine democratization. It is like, you know, you cannot have half pregnant. That's why, I mean, I love the line. You know, well, this is not a perfect democracy. Where is a perfect democracy? Of course, like, you've got to work with the democratization process. Well, the goal of the reform is to develop or build disciplined, flourishing democracy. Yeah? Well, who are the disciplinarians? Of course, the generals and the military guys, they would discipline the people. And finally, on the reform, one thing that the international community has failed to understand is how the military process and see the world and the reality of Burma. They see themselves, over the past 50 years, every single military cadet, you know, has been brainwashed to think he is a cut above the rest of the society. He is essentially the, you know, entitled to rule. If you look at the current military leadership, they are feudal. Feudal in the sense that they are second-generation generals. Their fathers were top leaders of the previous generation. Now, Commander-in-Chief may outline his father was a Home Minister and Commander of Western Command who was involved in ethnic cleansing of the military. Now the son is carrying on with father's legacy. The head of the intelligence, now 53 years old. I worked with him for 4 years. And at the time, he was a lieutenant colonel. He is now a lieutenant general. His father died in action. You know, and so the second generation leaders are now coming up. And they have been in power for 50 years. The military in Burma is not just one of many institutions. It is a class in and of itself. So because it is a class, it has serious and definable core interests. And those core interests, they define as, you know, the ultimate control over politics and economy. Yeah. And now onto the ceasefire. Like Amada talked about the difficulty of hammering out the nitty-gritties. No, the problem is not about nitty-gritty. The problem starts with the macro picture. Federalism is no to every single military officer. I heard it from their mouth straight up. Federalism, no, that's going to be balkanization for Burma. Yeah, we have, according to the Burmese, you know, statistics, we have 135 ethnic groups. Yeah, 57 of them are under the rubric of Chin, and some of them are not even real ethnic people. They are names of the rivers, but nevertheless, they are counted as ethnic groups. 135. You know, providing that they are true, they are not. But if you have that multi-ethnic community, you cannot have a unitary state. It's just simply not possible. It has to be a federal arrangement, whether it's arranged along geographic lines or ethnic lines. The arrangement, political arrangement, of the Burmese state and an administrative structure have to be federal. Yeah? Unitary state dictatorship system, that's not going to work. And the only viable form of the state constitution has to be federal. And that is the only viable form is also the form that the military cannot accept. So just like yesterday, the Korean National Union came out officially saying, no way we will sign anything. The KNU is considered the closest ethnic group with the Burmese military regime, or the President Thein Sein and negotiators. And if KNU said no, that means there is no chance of ethnic ceasefire. The KNU said 4 points. We need to have federalism as the only viable structure as part of the discussion. We need to have a...
Closer to the microphone, please. Now you're in between two.
Sorry. We need to federalize the army. At the moment, there is not a single colonel, who is non-Buddhist. And there is not a single brigadier who is not a Burman chauvinist. So the army has purged itself of ethnic and religious diversity in a country that is so ethnically and religiously diverse. In other words, we've got an army which is not only feudal, but also racist, in the sense that one single ethnic group, Burmese, which I belong to, controls everything. Yeah? You cannot have a sustainable nation state that, with a single ethnic group controlling it. Finally, just 1 minute. Back in 2013, November, I published an essay in the New York Times saying ethnic ceasefire is not possible, simply because the military rejects the only viable framework which will work for everybody, or reasonably. And at the time, like Jimmy Carter and the so-called elders were going and pressuring the ethnic groups and civil society to accept the military's offer terms of the ethnic ceasefire. That was November 2013. And Thein Sein and Au Min, they do not have real power. Yeah? You have a serious problem when you have an ethnic ceasefire negotiation, political negotiation, where the negotiators and the highest authority or office that authorizes negotiation do not have any control over the military, which is the backbone of the regime's power. And finally, on the Rohingya, 2 points very quickly. People have described the Rohingya situation as communal, sectarian, Buddhist Rakhine versus Muslim Rohingyas. And secondly, a lot of people have seen it or presented it as an unfortunate but almost inevitable outcome of multi-ethnic societies opening up, meaning balkanization. But the fact is, persecution of Rohingyas are state-directed. It predates the opening of Burma by about 35 years, starting in 1978. Why Rohingyas were singled out when they were not armed, they were not fighting? Because the Burmese military have developed this strategic calculation that 1 to 2 million Muslim population with a single geographic pocket next to the most populous, or one of the most populous Muslim nations, Bangladesh, is a liability. Therefore, you need to significantly reduce the Muslim population along the 170 miles border between Bangladesh and Burma. So therefore, they have, despite different changes in the top leadership who is running, they are pursuing a single strategic equation, preemptively purging the northern Rakhine State of Rohingyas, who they see as potential proxies for the Bangladeshi army. So therefore, this is no mere ethnic conflict. This is state-directed, I would say, genocide that is, unfolding over the past 37 years. I'm going to stop here. Thank you.
Well, with that very strong